We're here again with William Budington to chat about a recent report published on the Intercept by Yael Grauer about clandestine tracking via popular Android apps. Thanks a lot for bringing this article to my attention and taking some time to chat, William.
Absolutely.
Can you tell listeners what the article disclosed and what this says about motivations for many free apps available out there?
Yeah, so basically this article describes how the most popular Android apps include trackers, and not only do they include for any given app, but there was a total of 44 trackers found in a poll of 300 different apps, and this was done by security researchers at Exodus. And in follow-up research by Yale's privacy lab has confirmed the existence of 25 of those types of trackers. It's really kind of concerning because the trackers often are actually subverting the normal mechanisms within Android to disable your track. If you have like your location disabled, for instance, your GPS, a lot of the tracking mechanisms within the apps that are actually like gathering about your location data, and they'll gather your location data via the Wi-Fi card that you have, based on figuring out where you are in the store, because they have different sensors in different places in a store, and it'll track your location across your visiting different shops. So there's a lot to be concerned about here. Often the most random shady apps that you will find on the Play Store, it's the most popular apps that you use every day. Things like, OkCupid or Lyft or Uber or other very popular apps.
Or flashlight apps, right?
The flashlight app, exactly. Yeah, these are containing invisible trackers that have nothing to do with the functionality of the apps themselves. And you're the target. You're that at you is being marketed to third parties, and you are the product.
So the article talks about tracking people around physical space, but it also talks about tracking across platforms and devices. Can you talk about how that's possible?
Yeah, so one of the ways that is described in this article of tracking users is through an audio beacon. And so this company named FidsUp was using audio beacons that are higher pitched than are within the audible realm to communicate that a user is in a store and thus track them. So this is really crazy, right? This is trying to get a signal out about your movements throughout a store in order to market products at you, but not giving any attention to your privacy throughout your movements. It's this really scary technique, and it's also been used by a company called Silverpush in the past to link your devices together. So there's this company called Silverpush, and what it did was there were inaudible audio beacons, kind of an oxymoron, but above audible range to humans, being incorporated within advertisements on smart TVs. And once the advertisement was played, then any device in the room that had this Silverpush piece of software included would know that you were watching that advertisement and know about each other. Since then, this practice has stopped because they have actually had an FTC complaint that was given against them. But there are certainly other companies that are doing this. So this kind of realm is called cross-device tracking. It's when you have your different devices, say your computer or your phone and your tablet, they're all linked together because they're able to do so through really shady practices, which if people learned about, they would really be furious about, I think.
Now, did you just say FTC as in Federal Trade Commission as opposed to Federal Communications Commission?
Yeah, it's the FTC that issued the complaint because it was a shady business practice.
Yeah, interesting. And yeah, I guess necessarily excluding certain products from marketing opportunities, so like a monopolizing sort of thing.
Yeah, they had thought that Silver Push. So they didn't issue this to Silver Push itself. They issued this to applications on your phone that are including the Silver Push's software within them. So you don't actually go and download Silver Push yourself, because who would do that? These apps are including the Silver Push SDK, it's called, within their software, and it's all bundled together when you get an app. And so what the FTC did was they issued warnings to the app developers, companies that are developing these apps, saying you may be running afoul of the law by basically including this tracking mechanism within your apps. At any rate, Silver Push stopped doing tracking in this way.
So just to belabor the point of the question, so basically, would this be the kind of scenario where when you install the app and you give it this random app that shouldn't have any need for it access to your microphone? Is that the sort of thing that would give it access to communicate with the audio beacons?
Yeah, that's right. And Android permissions work has made it so that originally you had all these permissions asked for all at once when you install an app. And lately, Android has been switching to a model where the first time an app wants permission to record audio, then it'll ask you, and you can deny it. So that's like a better thing for privacy, because it'll be obvious when an app starts to record audio, and then you can just deny that permission. It doesn't mean that you can't install the app. You can still install the app, but then you can just deny the permission when you actually have it installed. Older versions of Android don't have that. You have to install all the permissions, and they can use it at any time. That's just the way that it used to kind of work, and the way that most devices that are still out there that are Android devices still work, because this kind of new permission scheme is actually pretty new, and not all Android devices have the newest software. But not to give Google too easy of a cut here, because really a lot of the trackers that that these security firms have found have been DoubleClick, and DoubleClick is a company that Google bought some years ago that tracks users and their usage of these apps. So this kind of can range from people's, what apps they have installed on phones, which phones they have, what devices they have, where they're traveling. In FinZup's case, there's a thing that this company that called Timo that was studying geolocation for 10 million French citizens. So, and then they were kind of forced to, I think, but basically, all sorts of different tracking technologies just from the apps that you have installed in your phone. That's really scary. It means that you can't really be sure what a app that you have installed is doing. They're not very clear about what they're doing here. And you often don't actually have the prerequisite knowledge to figure it out, right? Like Exodus had to develop this specially crafted software to analyze these apps and see what trackers were included in them. And this isn't something that's available to do if you're just someone who wants to use an app. You have to be a security researcher to figure this kind of stuff out, then that's not something that most people can do. And so it's really kind of shady what they're doing here. One thing that you can do is, and this is a suggestion that is in the last section of the article, is that instead of using the Google Play Store to install apps, you can download this thing called F-Droid. And so F-Droid is an open source app marketplace, app store. And that means that you can actually see the source code for any app that you're installing. And thus you can see if they include any trackers. And F-Droid actually doesn't include any apps that have obvious trackers in their source code. So you can be protected from the apps that you are installing by knowing and having that code inspectable. You have this effect of F-Droid auditing any app that's out there and seeing that, hey, this is a shady app, we're not going to include this. So that's one thing. Another thing you can do is, just use the web browser for your mobile device. There's a great web browser called Brave, which you can install, and it has, several mechanisms to protect your privacy. It has a blocker built in. It has HTTPS everywhere built in, kind of protections. And then instead of installing the Twitter app, just go to twitter.com, log in from the website. That's going to sometimes be annoying. I think that certain apps don't work as well from the web. If you have like an Instagram app, for instance, which I believe the report found didn't have any trackers, but just to take them as an example, the Instagram app doesn't work as well on the web browser as it does if you install the standalone app. But if you install it in the web browser, you have this kind of sandbox of the browser itself. And if it's going to request permissions, it's a website requesting permissions, and you'll see that up front. It won't be like you have a separate piece of software installed on your phone doing tracking on you. You'll see up front that it's trying to gather information on you. So that's one way to kind of at least segment off some of the privacy concerns of trackers being included in apps on your phone.
So just to get back to one point that you made, there had been a discussion at one point about posting Open Whisper System signal on F-Droid, and there had been concerns expressed by the people running Open Whisper Systems about the ability of F-Droid to actually determine what programs are safe and less safe. And obviously, here we have an example of the Android Play Store allowing this stuff through. But in your opinion, are the concerns about F-Droid and the verifications of the programs, the apps that are available through that, are they legit or maybe over-concerned?
Yeah, I think this comes down to an issue of trust. Basically, the way that F-Droid works is that build the apps for you using these build machines. So basically, instead of the apps being built by the developers and then the trust mechanism is that they are signed, the actual software has this kind of signing key that's, signed by developers themselves. F-Droid is signing those programs, those applications. And I think this comes down to like an issue of trust. For the Play Store publishes applications with the signature of the app developers, and F-Droid publishes applications with the signatures of F-Droid. And the trust is that F-Droid is going through this auditing process and making sure that the source code builds into the application, which is then delivered on your phone directly. If you just say that this, there's been cases in the past where there's been open source software, but that open source software doesn't directly correlate to what, the actual program that you download is. So to make it, I guess, to make it clearer, the app developers would publish the source code for their software, but it would be out of date. They would publish the source code, a year down the line or something. So you don't know if the latest version of a program that you're running, how it's actually running. So just saying that something is open source doesn't mean a whole lot unless there is a way that you can verify that the source code actually builds into what you're receiving. And that's what F-Droid really tries to provide, is that they have this whole build environment, and they sign, they're vetting for and signing for that they have actually compiled themselves. So that if you don't trust F-Droid, they could be doing this thing where there's like a tampered with program for you to download and install. I think that that's the main gripe that Signal and OpenWhisperSys has with F-Droid, saying that you're delegating trust to F-Droid instead of delegating trust to us. And Signal, it kind of comes down to who you trust more at that point. So Signal is really kind of trying to, they haven't really made their application available over F-Droid. You need to install it over the Google Play Store, or you can go to their website and install it yourself, given the actual program file that you can download. It's an APK file, and you can actually just download it and install it yourself. So that's it gives you two install mechanisms, but they don't publish on F-Droid because they say you shouldn't really trust F-Droid. You should trust us more, essentially.
Do you know how the researchers at Yale Privacy Lab and at Exodus Privacy were able to discover the tracking and sale of personal metadata?
Yeah, so in the article, it describes how they used a hash signature. And this is really a lot like what virus scanners do. They basically look for known, like a virus scanner's case, they look for known viruses given a little digest form of what that virus looks like. So a virus signature is basically they go over the actual bits of virus looks like, and they create a little digest form, which is a hash. It's called in computer lingo, and that just basically is the signature, like a heat signature, in the sense of signature, basically what this thing looks like. So I guess Exodus actually did this with the trackers that are contained in these apps. They looked for the signatures of the trackers in these apps, and were able to find which ones were included that way. Also, APK files, which are essentially Android binaries that you install on the Android platform, are pretty easy to decompress and look at the contents of what's inside. So there's that. They probably did some initial analysis of looking at the contents of certain apps, looking through, seeing, oh, this is a tracker, this is a tracker. Let's look for similar things that are included in other applications. So this is kind of the process that happens when security researchers look for specific elements of what's contained in different applications.
And do you have any real note about who is purchasing the data from the apps and for what purpose? I mean, you've mentioned, I guess, targeted advertisements based on what stores you're passing and what stores you've gone through.
Yeah, I think there is the ad industry. I think that's part of it. There's also just data miners, big data companies that are looking for ways to sell this data and to make a buck basically off of the data that have been gathered about you. So I think it's like a burgeoning ecosystem of different kind of companies that are trying to learn as much as possible about you and sell that either to provide targeted advertising or at some promise of profit down the line by knowing a lot about customer data.
Thank you so much, William Budington, for taking the time to chat about this.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Hide the planet! Hide the planet!
Shut up and get in the car!